Thank you, Pat. I'm going to set a little context because I can't not do it. And that is that November 4th, we elected a president who asked us to turn a page. And I think we've done it, and nobody knows what the new page reads like. But I think this is very timely that Dr. Smith, Gloria, and Mary Stark Harper are two names that are before us today. As we look at this, these are two of the great leaders in addressing the issues of minority health, and it just seems a right time. So I wanted to say that before we start.
Thank you.
Yeah. Since it's our hope, Gloria, that the audience here learn some lessons about your life story, your narrative, and how it might guide them, I thought we could start at the beginning and talk about maybe some of the people in your early life, the persons that shaped you, shaped your values, the lessons they taught you. If you would share that with us.
I'll try, and I'm sure it'll get easier as we go along. I'd like to first thank you for the opportunity to share with you. It is a real honor. I can grab a stage sometimes and say things, but I've rarely been invited to have this amount of time to really talk about myself. I consider myself a post-depression child. I was born in '34, and times were tough. So some of what we're looking at today looks a little familiar to me. My mother has probably had the most influence on me as a child, like most of you have parents who were quite influential. My mother was a teenager who wanted to be a professional. She always wanted to be a nurse. But she was lured to Chicago by her sisters who had moved there from Louisiana. And she thought that she was coming to visit one of them so that she could go to school, and she was married off. My mother always feels that she was enslaved by marriage. And so she was not a very happy wife, but she was a wonderful mother who kept her head in books, and she was always interested in the strong female characters in each book. And for some reason, nursing to her represented strength and courage and service to the community. She wanted to be a nurse, but she was not attracted by white uniforms and caps. She was more interested in Lillian Wall-like people, those who were out helping people in the communities, working in the settlement houses. And when I think back on this, my guess is that she could relate to these nurses because they had more relevance for her life and our life in first Chicago and then Detroit. So, but I didn't want to be a nurse. I mean, that was not my idea of what I would do. I landed in nursing quite by accident, and it was luck for me because I would have been a lousy scientist. Although I had the ability, I just would have never been able to focus and have the kind of attention that would, on looking at molecules and microbes or whatever. But my idea was that I would be a great scientist, I'd be a botanist or biochemist or something like that. Never dreamed that I would land in a profession where I would be working with people. And I came to nursing because there was money available. I was 16 years old, I had graduated from high school, and that seemed the easiest way to get an education for a person from our circumstance. So I applied. I was too young. They would not accept me in a diploma program because the laws at that time required that you be 17 and a half so that you would be 21 by the time you wrote your state boards and had been involved in clinical care. You couldn't be involved in clinical care before, I don't remember whether it was 19 or whatever. So I ended up going to Wayne because by the time I got to clinical, I would be old enough to have that experience. But I was very, very lucky because the people at the College of Nursing were quite like the women that my mother admired. They were intellectuals, they were strong, they were courageous, and they were doing things for people. In the interim, so it was my mother, then a couple of teachers in elementary school, one who told my mother, and teachers were not afraid to go in communities then, and although we lived in a pretty rough section of town, teachers came to visit. We all had to take the Stanford Binet, and my teacher showed up at my house to tell my mother that my brother, who was a year younger, and I had the ability to be whoever and whatever we wanted, and that we should be encouraged in school to excel. And she asked my mother whether or not we owned books, whether she had started a library for us. And when my mother told her she had not, she said that she should, and gave us our first books that we owned. But we had already been accustomed to going to the library. So it was a couple of teachers, my mother, and then the faculty at the College of Nursing. Now, they were all women. These were all women.
I did notice.
Yes. Not that there weren't some men around, but they were all women, yeah.
And strong women.
Mm-hmm.
And then you went into public health, which kind of seems to flow from everything you've said right now.
Well, that was kind of interesting, too, because I had my public health nursing experience. And the Wayne's program was a 4.5-year program with only one summer off. And so when I was in my last part of my sophomore year, I had, out of sequence, my visiting nurse experience. And they liked me a lot. They thought I was pretty bright at the VNA. And they decided I was going to work for them. So I never had a choice. So from that point on, they owned me, more or less. B. Gewick, who was a supervisor, she offered me work in the summer so I could work there one day a week. And then when I graduated, she said, "Of course you're coming to work for us." And that's how I got there. But it was wonderful work. It was perfect. In that job, in those days, I really felt like an independent practitioner. I had my assignment. I went, and at that time, the Detroit Visiting Nurses Association, which was a marvelous agency, it was run by women, right? Mm-hmm. And the executive, Emily Gleason Sargent, was tough. She was an excellent leader, and she was an excellent manager, and she knew how to put the boys in their place. She ran with the big boys, and they were able to do marvelous things at that organization. But they offered nursing care. They did maternity nursing, because in Detroit, there were still people who did not have access to hospital maternity services. So they were delivering babies in those parts of the county where there were no hospital beds available. Mental health services, they were doing, going into the factories and doing industrial nursing. So it was an organization that offered a generalized program with plenty of specialists. And there were medical consultants as well as occupational therapists, nutritionists, and physical therapists, and social workers. I learned a great deal, but I was independent. I knew that my work was essential. I knew that it made a difference in the quality of life for individuals and families. And so I was really proud of what I was doing. And it was very fulfilling. I got a great deal of satisfaction out of that work and would have stayed forever until they pushed me out to get my master's. And after I got my master's degree, I went back. I worked there as a assistant district office supervisor for 3 years, and they said, it's time, you need to do something else, it's time. But my dean, my advisor from the master's program at the School of Public Health in Ann Arbor, they got on the telephone and talked about it. And that's how I got to Tuskegee Institute as a faculty member, helping them to develop their public health program and to have that program accredited in public health for the first time in the history of the program. But it was, you know, these people who not only taught me, role modeled, but they mentored and continued to network and advise me throughout my career until they were no longer able to do it.
You mentioned Tuskegee Institute, which is one of the places where your life intersects with Mary Stark Harper's in the sense of both of you have history there. But you also have other things in common, I think, in terms of where you invested your energy and what kind of values you showed. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, you know, in the 50s, in schools of nursing, which were much smaller places, you were required, and I do mean required, on a monthly basis to go in and have a little chat with the dean or some other significant person in the School of Nursing and tell them what you thought you were going to contribute to improve society. You had to really, you know, and at first I thought, why are these people making me fabricate this stuff on a monthly basis? And, you know, I've got to think of something, you know, and they're sitting there looking at you so intently and, you know, you're struggling. But finally it hits you that they were forcing each one of us to think about who we were and how we fit into things. Mm-hmm. And to express that, they had very clear notions about professionals and how much the community had invested in them and what they were required to do, what they were obligated to do because the community had invested. The dean had a little speech that she gave from time to time that went like this. You think that your parents have paid for your education, but what your parents have paid and what you have gotten through scholarship is insignificant in comparison to what the community has invested to keep this institution here for you, to keep it going so that you can get this education. You must repay that. And the way that you will repay it is through the application of the knowledge and skill which you have gained in this institution. And so when you left, you knew that that was an expectation. And that you didn't go there just because you wanted a good job or you wanted to say that you were a professional. You went because you had something important to do. You had important work to do, and it was essential. And so I always wanted, whatever I did, I wanted it to apply to my community that had been so supportive and so helpful in assisting me to get this education. It didn't come easy. My mother borrowed my first tuition, which was a mere $66. She borrowed it. I was 16, I went to Wayne, and I immediately lost the little flannel change purse that I had put the money in. I went into a telephone booth because registration was just awful in those days. And somebody had asked me a question which I couldn't answer, and I went in to call home to get the information. I had this little flannel purse. I had the $66 plus change in it for my bus fare. And I lost it. I left it. And what do 16-year-olds do? I started blubbering. I got up to the window to pay my tuition, and I didn't have it, so I just cried. And some young man came and said, "What's the matter? What's the matter?" And I said, "Oh, I went into all of this." And he said, "Well, dry your eyes, and let's retrace your steps and see if we can find it." So he went with me station to station, and finally, there was only one thing he said left to do, and we went to Lost and Found, and the man said, "Describe it." And when I told him it was just a little purple flannel purse, he said, "Okay, here it is." So I felt that was divine providence, really. I was meant to go to school, because my mother could have never borrowed another $66. I always felt that way. But once I got there, then the dean of the College of Nursing always had a source where she could get the money, and so I could have tuition. And then when I was a sophomore, she decided I need to live on campus, although I was 10 minutes away by bus, because everybody needed a college campus life experience. So I lived on campus. So I owe a lot of people, from the cab driver who, we had a rural nursing experience in Tecumseh, Michigan, which was several miles from Detroit. We didn't have a car, and I was to meet one of my classmates to get to Tecumseh, and I arrived, and I thought I was late. And I had taken a cab to get to our meeting point. And when I didn't see her, I panicked and started crying again. And the cab driver said, "What's the matter?" I told him. He said, "Well, just hang on." He said, "I'm going to be off duty, and I will drive you to Tecumseh." And he did. I mean, I could not believe, this was, my God, I mean, it had to have been at least a 45-minute or an hour drive from Detroit. So that was, I felt, at great cost to him. And there was simply no, out of the blue. And so you have these people who are so proud of you, so pleased that you're getting an education, that they're willing to make some kind of contribution. And I always felt that I had to help in any way that I could, help others to have the wonderful experiences that I had.
How many black students were in your class?
Let's see. There were always black students in the College of Nursing at Wayne State, which is fascinating because I went there. They didn't all, the class ahead of mine was the first class that had all of its experiences in Detroit hospitals. So I started there in 51 and graduated in 55. The College of Nursing started in the 40s, okay? And their first students were RNs who got their bachelor's degrees. But in the faculty had determined that they always would have black students. I mean, the College of Nursing is the middle of the black community.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to avoid, isn't it?
Yes, and so that was a conscious decision that they made. But it was hard. because the hospitals were not allowing black students to practice.
Right.
And so it was the dean of the College of Nursing and that faculty who stood fast and said, you should be ashamed of you. Told the other nursing directors, because all of these hospitals had schools of nursing, you should be ashamed of yourselves. You got to do the right thing. So my class had all of its experiences in Detroit hospitals.
That's interesting. So there was a breakthrough thing.
There was a breakthrough, and by that happening, patients were integrated in
early
those
50s.
Yeah.
You though you spent a lot of time in leadership roles in state health departments, and it's clear public health is this huge part of your worldview, you did move on to become an academic. How'd that happen?
You know, I love these people who plan their careers, because I just feel that mine just happened.
Yours lands by helicopter, okay?
And as I said, you know, I mean, I went to Tuskegee because the dean and my public health instructor, Kay Robeson from the School of Public Health, decided I needed to do something else. I needed to make a contribution in some other area, and that it was time for me to move on. You know, they felt I loved what I was doing, and I thought I was pretty hot stuff, and I thought I was moving mountains. You know, I mean, I had all these creative ideas. I made some blunders, you know, naturally, because I knew all the answers. I had a plan for everything.
It's always nice to meet omniscient people, yeah.
But they decided that I needed to make a contribution someplace else. And that my first experience teaching was not fun, because I unfortunately at Tuskegee Institute, some of the stuff that these academics take for granted, like academic freedom, they didn't know what that was, I don't think. And so I got into trouble for doing things because they felt they weren't controlling me. You know, I believe that I was trying to work like I had been handled in my school of nursing. So it was more of trying to develop people, having collegial relationships. At Wayne State, every clinical group, there were at least 2 social events that you had with your clinical instructor. You know, your clinical instructor might have 8 students. You'd have them to her home at least twice during the semester for dinner. So it was a total experience. The approach was one where you have to work with these individuals as whole people. Social skills, you know, as well as clinical performance. And so that was real important. And when I attempted to do that at Tuskegee, they said I was fraternizing with the students. And that was a no-no, you know, that kind of thing. And I had arguments with the dean about grades. And she should not have been interfering. But I didn't know, I had never heard of academic freedom or anything. I just knew that it was wrong. I didn't know what the name of the rule was, but I knew that I was being violated. And so it was not a happy time for me, and so I left.
But you eventually went on to be a dean twice. Talk about that. Which sounds like a better job for you than the one you were in right before there.
The students were wonderful.
Yeah.
And the program did get accredited. I was able to do that. And the faculty at Wayne helped. You know, we had real strange notions in those days. You know, you didn't give somebody your course outline or share material. You only gave them, you told them what books to read and what principles. It was a no-no. We had some funny notions in nursing. because, everybody has to develop his own, which doesn't make sense, and which is why you have problems with standards. If people don't know what to do, give them something that will help them to do it better, instead of telling them,
Good luck.
go read Mildred Montag or some other stuff. At any rate, I got the job done. I just didn't like the environment. Right. So when I got to Oklahoma, because I married, and my husband was assigned to Fort Sill, and I worked first for the state health department, which was nice, and then I went to Prairie View, where I was fired.
Do you want to just leave that hanging, or do you want to share something there?
Then I went back to Oklahoma, and I was recruited by the University of Oklahoma College of Nursing, and the dean had been there just 2 years, and she decided. Now, you do know that Oklahoma was the only state that didn't...
Only totally red state in the United States. Do you know that?
Not one county.
Not one county fell off. Yeah, they were all red. We do know that.
But anyway, Eleanor came from California.
Yeah.
And she she simply could not stomach the culture. She was very radical in terms of her ideas, had this cigarette with a holder hanging out the... Well, the faculty, and I had just been recruited. This was my first year there, really. And the faculty, we were talking earlier today, the faculty, she was shrewd. She called the faculty together and she said, I'm resigning. We have made progress in the 2 years since I've been here. We have tripled the College of Nursing budget. The school has gained its autonomy and blah, blah, blah. And now you have to think about how you can sustain the momentum. What kind of leadership will help you to position yourself so that you can transition to a new dean? She reminded them that it took them 2 years to recruit her, and it would likely take 2 years to recruit a new person. And she said, so you have to look among you and decide who is the person who's best able to help you to hold your position. I was brand new. Has anybody seen Putney Swope, the movie, which they had on the market briefly and took off? Where it was about Madison Avenue ad agency with one black employee. And they decided that the executive died, had a heart attack, and keeled over. And so they were going to vote on who was going to be the replacement, and everybody was going to be kind to the one black, and he ended up with all the votes. Well, it was kind of like that. At least that's what I say. I don't know. But anyway, they decided that I would be, they wanted to recommend to the provost, the medical executive is what he was called, for the Health Sciences Center, that I be the interim person. And they did it. I mean, and there was, everybody voted, so it wasn't nothing that he could do except appoint me, which irritated him no end, because he felt that he had been denied his prerogative. I mean, he didn't have a choice. So he got me. And I was, believe it or not, folks, probably the longest interim dean in history, because I was interim dean 2 years and 8 months before I was appointed. And I was appointed by the person who succeeded him. He was very angry at the faculty. I mean, instead of him saying, I'm not going to do it, he didn't have that kind of guts. He just accepted me. So it was a wonderful job. I had a great time. And I know that I was successful in the role. So it wasn't something that I planned.
No, it doesn't sound like it.
It really wasn't.
I would like to have been there for the meeting where all the faculty came to this visionary moment together. That would have been good.
They were sorry afterwards. They really were. I mean, God, it really was like Putney Swope. They were, oh my God, what have we done here? So this was Oklahoma.
I know. It's like, I picture it all the time. Yeah.
And I had to. I called in after about 2 or 3 months when these clowns started acting up. I called in my psych faculty and I said, hey, what is going on here and what are we going to do about this so we can get on with our work? And we talked. I figured these are supposed to be my experts on this faculty. And we decided that we would have a retreat and that what was the source of the problem was racism. They had made this decision and they weren't sure how to live with this. So I couldn't go and tell them that. This had to come from the group. So the psych faculty reasoned this. And the way we decided to approach it was to have a facilitated retreat, 2 days, away from the city, in the campus, of course. And we would have facilitators who were multiracial and multicultural. Well, we did it. The first time it was a disaster because the facilitators got co-opted. Mm. They were multiracial, but they had no experience in the dynamics of racism. And so they ended up being as much of the problem as we already had. And so we did it again, and we used people who were much more authoritative and skilled in this. They were trained through A.K. Rice, through the Tavistock. And that was a wonderful experience where we didn't come out, singing the Hallelujah chorus, but we knew what some of the issues were. We had an agenda for moving forward. We had people who would call the issue when they saw it surfacing. I didn't have to do it. So I was never placed in the role of having to confront somebody directly for their behavior because the faculty would call them on the behavior. So, because the reality is that in an organization, everybody wants the same thing, basically, and that is success and progress, and they have to figure out how they're going to get there.
Just because this is important, I think, what year was it that you confronted all of that?
Lord, let's see, 72. 72.
I just think for the audience, it gives you a very interesting context for when that particular challenge was faced. You then went to a deanship you enjoyed a lot, I think, at Wayne State.
I went back home to Wayne State. That was different, let's get real. That was a group of prima donnas. You talking about prima donnas.
I know some of them prima donnas, yes ma'am.
I loved the work at the University of Oklahoma because once we got over the initial hump, it was so much easier for people to see that we all wanted to grow together. The one thing that kept that work going was that group wanted to be number one. Mm-hmm. Wayne, they thought they were number one, and they didn't need to do anything to change that. It makes a huge difference.
Yes, it does.
Aspiring and willing to work to move to the next step makes a huge, huge difference. But I enjoyed it, you know, and I've only been one place where I didn't, well, you know, I got fired from Prairie View, but so I got to say, you know, I was in two positions where the environment was not necessarily conducive for me.
But you're unusual in that you had leadership roles in very specific service initiatives, even at the state level. Then you had leadership in large and complex university schools of nursing. And then you had a third leadership career, essentially, with the Kellogg Foundation, which was not only has a lot of authority, but it also was global in character. So from all of that leadership, because this is a group looking at leadership, what was unique about these? What did you learn? What do you know about leadership because of all
one
that?
strand through all of that for me, which won't be necessarily for you, is that every job I had some concerns about creating opportunities for people who had been excluded, previously excluded. That was important in every work that I've ever done. And I'm always, even though I have had, the charge was greater from the institution, that was a theme that went through it for me that kept me going. Here I am at the Kellogg Foundation. I'm only going to be here so long. What can I do while I'm here to make a difference? How can I create greater access for communities? You know, how can I help people to move their agenda? You have to have something that drives you beyond just status and a desire for power, at least for me.
Yeah. If you look at all of your career and you look at all those leadership roles, and even, you know, those wonderful stories about finding the purple purse, if you could name events or achievements that stand out that you think tell your story best, what would they be?
I'm not sure. I prayed long enough for a husband.
Actually, there's nothing on my list that refers to this, so you know. Except I know he was a very devoted man.
I don't know, Phyllis. I think the ability to see opportunity in each one of those jobs, like when people say, which job satisfied you the most? I was satisfied with all of them. I could, and I exercised leadership in all of them. I had power in all of them, you know. And so sometimes I'm baffled when I hear nurses talk about being empowered. I don't know what I honestly don't know what they're talking about. We're licensed to practice. We have an opportunity to help people. We make a difference between whether some people live or die. We enable communities. We're very powerful, powerful people. And our knowledge is different from other medical professions. We see the world differently, and because it is different, we're able to help people to cope in ways with their illnesses that others are not. So I'm just real satisfied with my life. I never thought I would earn more than $10,000 a year, and if I earned that, I was going to be rich, you know. And so maybe my aspirations, maybe I had low aspirations. I don't know. I just feel pretty fulfilled.
You've actually received a lot of awards. I mean, a lot of awards. Actually, you have to carry this with a little folder when you carry the list of awards. It's extraordinary. Are any of those stand out for you as particularly powerful or have meaning for you, what your commitments were and your beliefs were?
Lord. maybe
I can tell
don't-
you some of my favorites. I really
what's
think
your
your role in
favorite?
starting the National Black Nurses Association is a real significant
It was
one.
quite significant.
Because it changed what
And that,
happened.
but we started with starting Oklahoma chapter.
Is that
and
true?
we
I didn't know
we
that.
have it's gone, it's dead.
I bet.
We also had a group for the university, you know, black faculty and staff. We've always been inclusive. We've always believed through our organizations that it was important to include everybody, you know, like the Oklahoma black faculty and staff. We felt that everybody could make a difference in the lives of these students who were struggling to get through that institution. And so some of the stuff that we were applying in the nursing group, we applied for the greater faculty and staff. I think nurses are just very well prepared to do a lot of things, to exercise leadership in a lot of places.
I'm going to, this is a very personal comment. Probably the thing I admire the most about Gloria, and the thing that I have followed with fascination and to some degree of joy and sometimes a little bit of playfulness in my heart, is I think people who know you know that one of your greatest strengths is your courage. That they may describe it as that you shook things up, or you said this thing that startled people. But it has always seemed to me that you were a truth teller who, in the truth-telling, demonstrated courage. And I'm just wondering if you could talk a little bit about what it is that makes you able to take that leap.
The College of Nursing at Wayne State.
We're all going to go light a candle in front of that place, you know.
You think I'm kidding?
No, I don't.
When I went to Wayne, I grew up, like I said, in Detroit. I was protected in my community. It was a black community. I went to schools where the staff and the faculty were mixed races, but the student body was a black student body. So when I went to Wayne, that was like, good Lord, you know, here are all these people. They're all so smart. They're white. They got to know more than I know, you know. I mean, that was just the way I felt. And I would sit there in class, and the classes were small in those days, and the faculty, and it was any number of them, you know, it wasn't just a single one, would say, they'd ask questions and they expect an answer. And I would just sit there, and finally they would say, now, Miss Richardson, you know the answer to that. Why don't you speak up? And they just kept pushing and pushing, and they created the monster. I mean, that's exactly what happened. You know, they said, you know it, I know you know it, speak up. Mm-hmm. And I just feel they were so strong in their beliefs about nursing, what nursing is, what it must be, how important the practice is. They're simply, if there was one thing that I wish that somehow we could grasp and transfer to our current professionals, is this kind of socialization, this sense of who you are and how important you are and how obligated you are to the people who helped you to get where you are. If we could just do it, but we don't. I don't see it happening in the same way. Our schools are too big. You know, I know it's difficult to do that. But how do we transfer that sense of, you know, I've got to do this. I mean, I'm obligated to be this.
Yeah, there's a commitment.
And if you can't speak up and say what it is that you believe, then somehow you are not representing the community very effectively.
Yeah, you've said that several times. You still have a link in your soul, I think, to always remembering that you were going to give back to your own community. Is that part of a story of your legacy?
I think in many ways, and I'm ashamed in a way of some of this, in many ways, I still see myself in my community. You know, like some people, I never really had a lot of aspiration about being upper class.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm still anchored in my community, even though it's dumb because I know I'm not. You know, it's like if I go now back to my community, they'll see me as an outsider like anybody else. You know, you don't walk with your briefcase and people say, oh, she's home, she's one of us. It doesn't happen like that. But I feel that way. I feel in my soul, you know.
And you still do very deliberate things to give back.
Yes, I do.
mean, that has always hit me as part of your legacy. Are there other pieces of your legacy that, if this audience were open to hearing about it, you'd give them? I think you've given them some on your passion about nursing. I think there's a social justice story.
Well, yes, that's part of, but like the example I gave you of the School of Nursing being responsible for integrating the hospitals, pretty much patient beds. That is because we were taught that schools of nursing can be instruments for social justice. That you had a responsibility. The dean, we have an African American museum in Detroit that was started by Charles Wright, who was a black OBGYN man. And Catherine Fable was one of his friends, and she literally encouraged him to follow that dream and create that. It took many, many years, decades as a matter of fact, to create that museum. But I see that as part of her legacy.
You know, this is not on our list, but it just hit me. There's a community of black nurse leaders that are very powerful in the United States, of which you are a charter member. Can you talk about how significant it is that that group takes good care of each other, feeds the mission, moves things forward?
Well, I think it's important, although some of the younger ones aren't doing what I would like for them to do.
I'm sure that's true.
I tend to believe that you help folks to develop, and then you need to move aside and give them the opportunity to continue and to develop others. You know, I don't see people remaining in place and hogging the spotlight. I mean, that annoys me a lot.
That's an important insight, though. I mean, if leaders only got that, they'd get a lot. By now they figured...
But if I haven't, I still want people to understand that if they don't have the message, I love graduate education, all these string of degrees, but I maintain that the socialization and the grounding that I got in my undergraduate program is largely responsible for who I am today. Those role models, those mentors were significant in my life and significant in helping me to frame what I think nursing is.
Yeah, actually, much of your entire story is about very strong people who were willing to give their time to you. That's what I hear. By now,
willing, and I didn't ask.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It was
spontaneous
gifts given. How generosity looks.
See, she's the intellectual one.
But she humors me, and it works out nicely. Which brings me to the one I wanted to raise. By now you figured out that Gloria has a great sense of humor. And part of what I think, my view is that healing is the most powerful form of healing is laughter. You have used humor very constructively, I think, your whole career. I mean, some of your finest moments are some of your one-liners, as you know. Talk a little bit about laughing.
I don't know. So you've asked me that before, and I really think that for me, humor has been, I've been fat all of my life. And for those of you who have been fat, or have little fat brothers and sisters, I think that humor has been a protection. I mean, it's one of the ways of being included. It's a way of avoiding rejection. I really think that that's what it's about.
That its early roots were there.
Right, yeah. I mean, see, you have forced me to reflect on that area.
I know it's really tacky of me, isn't it? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Pat had suggested I leave some time for the audience to speak, but before I do that, I have this one last thing that's important to me. I know November 4th, 2008 was an important day for you, and I think it was for the whole world, personally. And I think we shared in this extraordinary historical event. And if you'd be interested in sharing some of your thoughts about that with this group, I'd like to give you that window.
Well, I think like many, many folks, you wish for the ones who are not here, that they could have, I thought about Rita and Elizabeth Carnegie and Mary Harper and my parents. My stepfather died last year. He was 99, and it would have been great if he could have lived to have this experience. And I think that was happening in homes across the nation.
Yeah.
People yearning for loved ones who would have cherished the moment. It's just wonderful. To me, what it represents is growing up of our nation. And I am so, like the president-elect's wife, I'm just so proud of what we have accomplished. It would be great, when I worked for Kellogg, I traveled all over. And one of the wonderful experiences was going back and forth to South Africa and to be present before they abolished apartheid and afterwards. And this moment reminded me so much of the first election in South Africa, and to see the pride and the joy in the faces of voters across the nation and those who rejoiced with us across the world. It's just a wonderful moment.
Yeah, it's extraordinary, which we haven't figured out yet, I think.
No, I mean, in a way, I'm still numb.
Yeah, yeah. I think it would be nice if there are people who would like to ask you questions, if you would hear them. I believe we have
people
mics.
are probably sick of me.
No, I don't think so. I think they're rather entertained, actually, right? See, look at this.
I'm sorry I don't have a microphone, but I am dying to hear where you got fired from Prairie
When she passed on it twice, I thought, okay.
I'm an Arkansas girl, and I just want to hear this story. I know it's going to be good.
I took a job at Prairie View as the assistant dean of the undergraduate program. My husband was in Korea. And I went to visit with a friend in Houston who was telling me how wonderful Houston was. Oh, you've just got to come. They had been in the military and had retired. So I wrote my husband and I said, I went to visit the Oregons, and they're having such a great time in Houston. I think I want to live there. So he said, whatever. So I went up for a job interview, and they hired me at Prairie View as the assistant dean. So I moved with my little poodle and my sister. And I get there, and it was a dumb, first of all, it was dumb on my part to accept this job, okay? I didn't do enough homework. So I made a dumb decision. And I got there, and school was going to start in just 6 weeks. Nobody oriented me, so I started orienting myself. And I was driving back and forth from Houston to Prairie View, which was 52 miles or whatever, in a carpool with some faculty. And every day, they would ask me the same question. What is your job? Well, I didn't catch on. And I would say, I'm the assistant dean and the chair of the Department of Community Health. And they said, Well, after I wasn't oriented, and this had been happening, I started reading the faculty minutes, only to learn that the lady's car that I was riding in every day, that was her job. And she had not been told that she didn't have it. Okay, that was the first thing.
That's a clue, yeah.
That was the first thing. And we were working on making some, I had to struggle with trying to plan for these students who were coming in, and I was making adaptations so they could have their experiences in maternal and child health nursing, and I had incorporated community experience as well as the hospital, et cetera. Anyway, that was going pretty well. And I didn't realize that it was, the dean saw the faculty as we and they, us and them. I didn't, because she was hardly ever there. And I thought as assistant dean, I had to learn, I had to develop a relationship with them, understand what their various roles were, so I was doing that. And she was getting angrier and angrier. First, she had to be crazy. But anyway, the salesman was visiting, and she was busy ordering stuff for her new office, which was going to be upstairs. She was going to sit up over us like the Lord of the universe. And she ordered this huge desk. I mean, it was a corporate executive desk where you could have like 8 chairs around it. She'd sit on one side and, it was a half moon. Real elaborate, expensive. Oh, she was ordering draperies and shears and whatever. And there we were downstairs trying to organize classrooms and didn't have chalkboards. It was ridiculous. And so the salesman came in, and I was standing there. Now, you guys won't believe this.
I probably will.
They brought in her elaborate desk, and he had a drape cloth over it. And I leaned on it, talking to somebody about how we were going to arrange this classroom. And he says, get off of that. Don't lean on that. This is expensive furniture. And I said to him, this is a school of nursing. This is not the place for expensive furniture. Well, he ran up and told her. She was spitting mad, furious. So she summoned me. I thought, she didn't come down, she summoned me. And when I went up, she started carrying on about how I was disloyal and yak, yak, yak. And guess what Dum Dum said? Well, I don't have to take this. I can quit. And she said, I accept. So I was on my way.
So you didn't really get fired. You just volunteered to leave.
That was fired. No matter how I tried to explain that, I got fired.
Yeah, that's probably reality-oriented.
You've mentioned several times about the culture the School of Nursing that you were in, and how you see that not happening now. And I know there's a lot of obstacles to that, but do you have some thoughts about what we can do to change that culture so that is more of the impetus, and the students that we're bringing up now have more of that vision?
See, I think that somehow we're going to have to figure a way to have that same kind of intimacy. And so there has to be some way of we have large classes. There's got to be some way of segmenting those classes so that people have an opportunity to relate to individual faculty. Also, I think that there are some deans like Claire Fagan, apparently, who continue to teach. I don't remember what the course was that she taught every year her incoming students. I think it's important for deans of schools of nursing to maintain that kind of relationship with students. You know, we're all so busy these days, and there are new demands on deans. But somehow, executive teams are going to have to think through how that is going to be managed so that there is some way of personifying the dean, who she is, what she represents, what messages need to be fashioned and they need to be given to the students. And I think we have to take seriously the fact that we're preparing professional people. I think we are too frightened by some of the market-driven principles and putting up with a lot of nonsense that we shouldn't, so that we can have the numbers that we need and all of these things that we have convinced ourselves that we must do to maintain numbers of students. We can't do it at the expense of professional education, of developing people who have this kind of serious commitment and purpose in relation to the role of nursing.
Yeah. The piece I would add to it is one of my concerns is we don't have a lot of voices like Gloria speaking up on this issue to counterbalance all the voices that are pushing the other direction. And so I'm really glad this group gave her this arena and these moments.
We don't really process what that means. We don't really attempt to do that, you know. I mean, it's that kind of thing that we are supposed to be scientists, people who think. I think we're obligated to challenge some of the ideas that have taken over, you know. So, I don't mind being archaic sometimes.
I don't know if it's archaic or if it's, from my standpoint, I think that whole question of how do you get to that which is the sort of heart of the matter, what really counts, what counts when you take away all the fluff and all the facading. And I think it is hard to find arenas for that conversation today.
It's very difficult, and I had a kidney transplant 4 years ago. So I had the wonderful experience of hospitalization and it didn't go well. I had several tubes that I walked around with for like 13 months. And one of the things that I've learned over and over again is that the medical profession does not like to acknowledge aberrations. If things don't go the way that they're supposed to go, they're very uncomfortable with that. And will actually try to make you deny reality because they don't want to accept it. And so you have to have somebody, nurses, and for me it was friends who were nurses who said, no, you're right, this is not going the way it's supposed to go. And you begin to think about who we are, what difference it makes in people's lives to have somebody to help them to deal with very serious health problems, very serious complications. When your physician is telling you something's wrong with you, you're not seeing reality the way it is. No, I got 3 tubes hanging out of my abdomen with urine coming out all of them, 13 months. Yeah, you're right.
That strikes me as odd, yeah. It isn't what I'm used to, yeah.
Right. So, and it was nurses who hung in there, who saw that the wounds healed, who insisted on wound treatment when the doctor says you don't need it, So I want those nurses out there, those people who are skilled, who have knowledge, who are willing to advocate for me as well as care for me. So I'm your patient, and I want you out there doing the right thing.
In terms of you as our patient and us doing the right thing, when we look at aging, and much of aging is going to occur at the population level globally in developing countries. So I'm interested in your thoughts or perspective as a member of the global community at this time of globalization, what role we as nurses, and in particular gerontological nurses, at a time of similar market crashing like with the last shift, what are some of your thoughts about what role we can play in terms of the population level?
See, it's hard for me to respond to that because in many of the places in which I worked, people are consumed with much younger populations because they still have high infant mortality. There are high incidences of HIV/AIDS, lots of young children who are being left without any parents at all. A lot of children who are still born with deformities, so that they will catch up with us eventually. But right now, this is where the problems are, and they're pretty serious.
Well, the life expectancy is shorter in most of those countries, too, so you don't have the same
because of
community.
the infectious disease.
Yeah.
And so I can't, I'm not a good person to ask that.
Is there a ceremony called closure in this?
Do I get up and sing?
I think so. We had asked her to do just a soft shoe, and